It's time for your Low Country Real Estate Market Update. It's the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. Brian is one of the top 1% real estate agents in Charleston. Find him online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-345-1273. Now, broadcasting from the WTMA studios, here's your host, Brian Beatty.
Good morning, Charleston, and welcome to another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. I'm your host, Brian Beatty. We're live in the studio this morning, so I encourage you to call in if you have any questions or anything that you'd like to learn more about. Maybe you want to share a story of your own about real estate. The number here in the studio, 843-556-1250, 843-556-1250. So, guys, here's the deal. I'm going to give it to you like it is this morning. I'm going to tell you what I think is going on in this market. I'm going to go against the grain. I'm going to tell you what you're not benefiting from because of the politically correct culture that we live in and the fact that they just don't have the data that they'd like to in order to report on what's actually going on, what the actual real state of the housing market looks like. Not just now, but at some point in the future. We don't know when things are going to take the turn and shift, but make no mistake, it's going to happen. It always does. I mean, real estate is a cyclical market. So it's just a matter of when and how hard are we going to get hit. So I'm going to share some things with you this morning that I think might surprise you. And so if you have any questions, I encourage you to call in 843-556-1250. And that's really what we've been doing on this program for the past 8 years, is helping you understand the real estate market, helping you become prepared as a consumer so that when it comes time for you to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, you know what's going on. You know the right questions to ask. You have a good pulse on the market. You benefit from my experience as somebody that's sold about 1,000 properties here in Charleston. So we can win together. So we can succeed in our real estate transaction. And if I can ever help you, if you're ever looking to hire a real estate agent, a real estate team, we'd love the opportunity to be that agent for you. My number is 843-400-8009. That's my personal number, 843-400-8009. Or you can check us out online. Listingsincharleston.com is the website. Listingsincharleston.com. A lot of great information on there. So I want to share some things with you this morning after leaving a real estate conference that I attended through a company in which I am coached as a real estate business owner and am also a coach for this company. I coach other real estate company owners across the country, anywhere from New York to California. And so I help them build their real estate business to grow up to 250 units a year. That's really my sweet spot. And so as we are all masterminding together, we're talking about the state of the market. We really had some fantastic special guests. And this is, the first thing that I'm going to say is this, is that I don't have all the answers here. And frankly, nobody does. Anybody that gives you their crystal ball reading, you have to question. Regarding stats, there's a saying, especially in our industry, that's believe none of what you hear and about half of what you see. And so you also have to understand that our media is incredibly politicized. Headlines are misleading. And so when we are reading through the newspaper or we're looking online or we're watching the news, we're trying to figure out what's going on with the real estate market. What I need you to understand is that there are plenty of folks that are also, in addition to this kind of narrative that everyone wants to push right now, which is that everything's okay, everything's fine, everything's wonderful. There are some that are saying that we're going to have more REOs than we did in 2008. So an REO, just so you know, is real estate owned. It is a line item on a balance sheet for essentially properties, assets owned by banks, lenders. We can just call them foreclosures if that's easier. So when we look at some of these stats, when we look at the trends, the reality is that the media is only reporting on what they know, and I'm going to get into that in just a minute, but agents especially are not caught up to speed on what's going on with the future of our market. All we talk about is shortage of inventory. And don't get me wrong, I'm guilty of this too. But here's the reality. And again, if you have questions or if you really want to, kind of ask some blunt questions about what's going on in the market, I really encourage you to do so. 843-556-1250. That's the number in the studio. So don't get me wrong. I'm guilty of this too. I talk about shortage of inventory. I talk about the challenges of purchasing a home in this market where there is very little for sale actively on the market at any given point in time. But there's really not a shortage of inventory if you think about it. Last year we sold about 6 million homes in our country. That's the second highest ever on record, second to 2005, which had about 7 million. So there really isn't a shortage of inventory, so to speak. There is an excessive demand curve that's, artificial in nature because of really low interest rates. And so real estate agents love pushing this narrative, there's no inventory and, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's true. But when we talk about transactions, there were 6 million transactions last year. So, but in real estate, we talk about sides. There's a buyer side and there's a seller side. So those are 12 million sides, 12 million opportunities for real estate agents to generate commissions. And, you have a lot of real estate agents in this industry that are complaining about not being able to find anything for their clients to buy. Here are a few other numbers that you should know, just by the way. There are 2.9 million people in this country with real estate licenses. About 2 million of them actually practice. We have 1.4 million realtors. And you know how many realtors did not do a transaction last year? 51%. So you have all these folks that have licenses, and, more than half of realtors, people that pay dues to become a realtor, more than just a salesperson, are not doing any transactions. So we have all of these sides, these transactions that have been done, and how are they happening? Well, there are, again, just going back to this narrative that agents are pushing right now, the reality is this. The agents that are getting out there and communicating with people, asking who they know that might be interested in selling a home, building databases and networks that they can tap into so that when they talk to a buyer and that buyer says, yeah, I want to buy a 4-bed, 3.5-bath home, 2,500 to 3,000 square feet in, Mount Pleasant, if that agent actually has the ability to say, which sellers have I talked to that would be interested in selling their house? They're kind of in the same position. They'd like to sell, they just don't really know where to go yet. Okay, so I've talked to this buyer. Let's match them up with this seller. If everything works out fantastic, I still have to find this seller a house. And the more you start to kind of stack up these dominoes, at some point in time, realistically, somebody's going to find something that is on market that will work for them. So if real estate agents can do a better job of lining these dominoes up, and I hate to refer to people as dominoes, but I'm just trying to give you a visual here. If people can actually, agents can actually play the role of matchmaker rather than just wait for buyers that they're working with to say, hey, I saw that property you emailed me yesterday. Can we go and take a look at it tomorrow? And the agent's like, oh, well, I gotta, let me move a few things around. Can you see it at like 6:30? And the buyer says, well, sure. And I mean, by the time you get to the house and it's been on the market 2-3 days, I'm sorry, but there's probably a high likelihood that there's at least another offer on it. So the agents that aren't approaching this market with a sense of urgency are not giving you the best opportunity to buy that house. And if they're basically relying on you, the buyer, to say, hey, I saw this house that you emailed me. When can we go and see it? That is another bottleneck in this process. What agents should be doing, and really the reality is when people hire us, it's because we get really granular on what those buyers are looking for, what they're going to like and don't like about the homes that we send after communicating with them. And then every time a new property hits the market, this is in addition to all the stuff we do to find off-market deals. But when something actually lists for sale publicly, first thing that we do with those properties is say, all right, hey, do we have anybody that is a match for that property? Oh, John and Sally were looking for something just like this. Let me call them and let them know that this just hit the market. I mean, just that simple act of calling that client and saying, hey, did you see that property that just hit the market? I think it's great. Can we go and see it today, at lunch or whatever? Just those small things are big differences in terms of your ability to be able to buy the house or not. This is really customer service that we're talking about. And if you're not getting that at a really, really, really high level right now, from your buyer agent, because listing agents have it kind of easier right now, right? When they put the property on the market, that sucker's going to sell. Unless it's vastly overpriced or you as the seller just chose not to do anything about the condition of the property. You really it's hard to not sell right now. I'll put it that way. So you have a lot of these agents that, kind of going back to my initial point, are complaining about the market and the fact that there's nothing for sale, or that whenever something does hit the market, it sells really quickly. Yet in many instances, they're sitting on their hands and they're basically waiting for the buyers to tell them what they want to see so that they can go and let them in the door. And then, let me, after they walk through the property, say, okay, well, let me go back and let me figure out what I think this place is worth. Let me call the listing agent and ask a few questions. Let me try and get some motivation out of the listing agent. Let me see what's going on with the seller. Guys, we're getting so many calls on our listings right now that it's frankly kind of irritating for us to answer the phone consistently from real estate agents that are trying to get information out of us, trying to kind of, have us leak information that they can use against us in the course of negotiations. And good agents don't do that. We protect the confidentiality of our client. So all you're really doing in those instances is wasting time. A buyer agent needs to be able to look at the market, analyze it, understand what that property's worth, make an appropriate offer. It's really not that hard. But because we have so many new folks that are untrained, it frankly just delays the process. It's a bottleneck. Not to say that there's anything wrong with new agents. We need them. I hire them. I train them. It's they are a part of my business. But when we talk about the state of the market, the reality is there is plenty of business to be had for the people that are willing to work hard to go out and get it and to be of value to their clients. So I'm going to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the state of the market. I'm going to give you some more, a better understanding of what's going on with all these forbearances and upcoming foreclosures. If you have questions, call into the studio. We'd love to chat. 843-556-1250 is the number here. Stick around for more of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA.
More stimulating talk on real estate matters with Brian Beatty next on 1250 WTMA. 1250 WTMA. Now, here's more of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA.
Welcome back, folks, as the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show continues here on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA. And WTMA.com. We are live in the studio this morning. Call into 843-556-1250. The wonderful John Quincy will answer. And as long as you're not a total crazy person, then we can chat about real estate. Any questions you guys have? We're talking about some pretty deep stuff this morning. The status of the market, what you guys aren't really getting when you read the news or watch the news. There's a lot going on behind the scenes here. And that's really the goal of this show is peeling back the curtain on this industry, helping you guys understand what's going on in the real estate market, helping you be prepared as somebody that will inevitably buy, sell, or invest in real estate. The amount of time that somebody stays in a home is increasing. We're at 13.9 years now. Used to be 7, used to be 8. It's just gone up and up and up, which is interesting. Now, actually, there was a commercial that played. This brings up a good point. There was a commercial that played just now, if you've been listening for the past few minutes, about inflation and people moving toward things like gold. The reality is this: we can only print money for so long. The value of the almighty dollar is connected to the world economy. We're not on an island here. We're ingrained in the world economy. And when currency debasement means the dollar doesn't go as far as it used to, we're going to have to increase interest rates. Why do you think so many people are moving into crypto, by the way? It's like the new gold as a hedge. So if you think about it, and really this is the main key here. So if you think about the difference between the payment between like a 6% interest rate and a 7% interest rate, it's fairly small. It's about a 10% increase in your payment. I think it goes from $600 a month to $665 a month. But going from 2.5% to 4% is a huge change. Not only is it a 20% increase, but it means that all of those folks that are low to middle income can no longer afford to buy a house. It's the change in payment of nearly 20%, but also the barrier to entry to purchasing in some of these markets. I mean, even Somerville. It is hard to find something that hits the market and isn't sold within a few hours in Somerville. So people are buying homes based on payment. Not interest rate, not the sales price. It's the cost of ownership that really matters. And as that cost of ownership gets to the point where it is no longer affordable, feasible, possible for a lot of people, then we're going to have some problems. That's when things are going to start to crumble. And so you talk about all these folks that have all this equity in their properties. This is a narrative that the media loves to push right now, is that we collectively have about $6 trillion worth of equity. A lot of that was built between 2012 and 2016. We don't really have much in the form of numbers past that. So even if you bought a house a few years ago and it went up a modest 5 to 8%, you still have cost of sale, meaning commission, repairs, closing costs associated with selling your home, somewhere around 10%. That's really, 10%, sometimes 12%, depending upon the condition of the home. That's all in. So if you're in forbearance meaning, for a lot of folks, meaning future foreclosure, but for forbearance meaning, hey, we're going to hit the pause button. You don't have to pay us payments right now, but at some point in the future, you're going to have to pay them all back at once. So if you have the cost of sale, let's call it 10%, and then you have 20 mortgage payments that you've missed, and you don't have the cash to get back on track, you do not have equity. You do not. So, you have to be careful when you read these headlines. You have to be able to read between the lines on some of these things. A popular headline would be something like the rate of forbearance declines. Well, it doesn't mean that forbearances are going down. It just means that the rate of forbearance isn't increasing anymore. So I want to talk about forbearance for a little while, because this is an issue, right? 20 to 30% of people that go into foreclosure had equity in their house. I bet you probably didn't know that. Basically, 1 in 4 people that went into foreclosure had equity. And by the way, if you have questions or you have stories to share, you're curious about something, any topic real estate related, it doesn't have to be this deep stuff that we're talking about right now, but I really want you to understand what's happening in our market. But call into the studio. Let's chat. 843-556-1250. 843-556-1250 is the number here in the studio. So basically, 1 in 4 people, 20 to 30%, had equity and went into foreclosure anyways. When people get behind, you really either go in one of two directions. You either withdraw or you become hostile. Most people tend to withdraw. Most people tend to kind of put their heads in the sand. They just can't deal with the stress of the situation. They stop opening their mail. They stop answering the phone. They just withdraw. They don't know what to do. They don't investigate their options. They just kind of shut down a little bit, or in some cases, a lot. So, and I've seen this. I mean, I got licensed in 2006, and then of course the market crashed in 2008. By 2009, I was in the top 1% of agents in the market because I understood how to help people at that point in time. I saw the writing on the wall. I partnered with folks that knew what they were doing, mentored me through it, to the point where I became an expert in it as well, and helped a lot of folks out of a lot of really bad situations. And I'm fearful that we're headed in that same direction. We should have had about 700,000 REOs, again, bank-owned real estate, hit the market last year that didn't, because of foreclosure moratoriums, before eviction moratoriums. I mean, traditionally, and I guess you guys probably didn't know this either, but traditionally, about 1 in 10 homes that sell in this country are in distress. So we would have had an even crazier year last year if we had an extra 700,000 properties hit the market. But if you guys noticed this week, we had some big news, really big news. They lifted the federal eviction moratorium. Now, there's still plenty of states that enforce it on their own, and they're trying to work on getting that overturned and putting a freeze on it while they're battling it. But the reality is, all these folks that have been staying in homes for a significant number of months that haven't been paying are now going to be asked to leave. And if they're not going to leave, they can be forced to leave through eviction. And so, you read these headlines and you just have to, I guess you just have to decide which side of the coin you're on this, really. I mean, are you in favor of the tenants? Are you in favor of the landlords that still have to make those payments on those properties, regardless of whether the tenant pays them or not? It's not, sometimes it feels like the media makes you choose. Well, let's just take it for what it is. The reality is we have a lot of properties that are sitting around that are in forbearance, that are, essentially referred to as NPLs, non-performing loans, which it's just a fancy word for default. That properties that are in default, loans that are in default. These are properties that are 30, 60, 90, 120 days without having received payments. Now, forbearance is not default. I want to get that straight. But, and by the way, we don't know how bad this looks yet, because there are different definitions that are used by different entities in terms of what default actually means. 30, 60, 90, 120 days. So, and by the way, the first round of forbearance cures, the average payout was $6,000. In other words, a lot of people could have made their payments. They just chose not to because they wanted to hoard cash. I mean, that's kind of what we tend to do in times of crisis. Remember trying to buy toilet paper at Costco? Everybody hoards in a time of crisis. It's just natural human behavior. And so we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to talk about these non-performing loans. I'm going to talk about kind of the future moving forward, and really the big secret that's been held from you in terms of actual reporting, the data, the stats, as it relates to this market. And again, if you have questions, please call into the studio. It doesn't have to be relevant to this particular topic. Maybe you just have a very simple question, real estate related. You want to know what's going on here in Charleston. Doesn't matter. We'd love to hear from you. 843-556-1250 is the number here. Or if you'd like to reach out to me personally, 843-400-8009. That's my cell, 400-8009. Or you can check us out online, listingsincharleston.com, or send an email, brian@brianbeattyteam.com. We'll be right back.
Have a real estate question? Ask Brian Beatty. Send him an email, lowcountryhomesales@gmail.com. The Brian Beatty Real Estate Show is on 1250 WTMA. 1250 WTMA. You're listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com.
Welcome back, folks, as the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show continues here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA, WTMA.com. I always like to take a little bit of time and just say thank you to listening and tuning in and being loyal listeners of the program. We've been doing this for 8 years, and this is something I take a lot of pride in. The ability for me to just kind of deliver it like it is, not be like the status quo agent where everything is sunshine and rainbows and, everything that I touch turns to gold. We ran an ad, I don't know, this was maybe 2-3 years ago, that called me the best real estate agent in the universe. It was one of my favorite ones because it's, the industry is so rife with misinformation and statistics can be skewed to push a narrative. And by the way, I understand the irony in that. I mean, here I am, a real estate agent, a real estate company owner on a real estate radio program telling you what's going on in the market and the future ahead. I get it. Okay. You can choose to believe whatever you want to believe. But I'm here to give you the side of the story that you're probably not going to get from the media because the reality is this. We were just talking about NPLs, non-performing loans. All right. And by the way, if you have questions, you want to question me, you have a story you'd like to share. Maybe this is something totally unrelated to what we're talking about. Doesn't matter. We'd just love to hear from you. If you want to call into the show, now's your chance to call in. You've got about 20 minutes left. The number here is 843-556-1250, 843-556-1250. So we've been talking about NPLs before we took a break. Non-performing loans, essentially loans that are in default. And as it relates to default, we're not sure if that means 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. But properties that are, or loans that are not performing. So once it gets to that point in time, let's say that you're making payments to Bank of America. Well, once you are in default, at some point, probably a little bit past 90 days, you're going to get a letter in the mail that says, assuming you're opening your mail, right? Remember what we talked about, how people kind of withdraw and bury their head in the sand? And actually, I tell you what, we're going to take a quick break from what I'm talking about. We're going to go to the phones. We're going to talk to Elliot. Elliot, good morning.
Gecko.
I heard gecko, and then he hung up, so I'm not sure what all that it was about. All right, so let's get back on track here. So we're talking about NPLs, non-performing loans. If you've been making payments to Bank of America, and then after about 90 days or so, those payments stop being made, you're going to get a letter in the mail. They're going to say, hey, you are now responsible for making payments to a new investor, a new servicer, right? They're going to switch things up on you. And that's because banks sell their NPLs. They sell them off. And the reason they're doing that, by the way, is they don't want the financial risk. They don't want the media attention. And remember all the lawsuits that got slung around about a decade or so ago? These banks do not want these properties, period. So if you don't make your payments to Bank of America after a few months, you're going to become serviced by a new investor. They're getting sold to private equity firms and hedge funds and investment trusts. These are known as non-bank entities. And as such, they are non-reporting. They are not required to report. So when you see the numbers that are being reported in the newspaper or that you're reading online or watching on the news about things like forbearance or about the number of properties that are in default, you have to understand that these are the numbers from the reporting agencies, the reporting entities, the banks, the GSEs, government-sponsored enterprises. So you're only getting half of the picture because the other half, all the defaults they've already been sold off, those entities don't have to report that. But here's kind of the scary thing, and this is kind of what I've been pushing towards here in the last 40 minutes or so, is that if you think about it, since these non-performing loans have already been sold off, the half of the picture that you're getting is the good half. It's the good half of the information. The numbers are usually 2 to 3 times higher than what's being reported. And by the way, the narrative, that this administration wants to spin is, hey, everything's fine. We'll figure it out. Don't you worry. Biden's your hero. He's going to take care of you. We'll get through this. By kicking the can down the road, really all they're doing is making it harder for people to get out. I mean, in 2008, we had an excess. We had access to easy money. This time around, we have access to cheap money. You think about it this way: the average down payment in the country right now is about 12%. But that's not equity. That's cost of sale. Equity is the amount that property has risen in value since you purchased it. So the 12%, that's cost of sale. Again, by the time you incorporate all the fees associated with selling the property, you're only getting some of your down payment back. So it's not like you're walking away with a check that you've earned. You're walking away with a little bit left of what you put down. But if you're in forbearance and you don't have a way of getting out, if you haven't been really diligent, if you haven't been fortunate to become employed again and get back on your feet financially, there are plenty of people out there that do not have the money to get back on track. And by the way, they are doing loan modifications. This is something that we used to talk about, a lot from 2009 to 2011, 2012. I mean, I did a lot of distressed transactions after the market crashed. And they are doing loan modifications. Loan modification is very simply a strategy to try and keep you in your home without foreclosing. So let's say you bought a house, 10 years ago. A lot of those initial payments you make go toward the interest balance, right? So you've made a fairly small dent in the principal balance of your loans. A lot of those initial payments you're making are toward interest. So if you're going to do a loan modification, especially after a forbearance, here's what the bank's going to say. It's going to look something like this. They're going to say, all right, so here's what we'll do. We're just going to tack on all of these missing payments and accrued interest and penalties to the principal balance of your mortgage. All right, so hey, don't worry about it. I know you've missed all these payments and there's a bunch of accrued interest and blah, 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 blah. We're just going to put it on the back end of the mortgage. We're going to add it to the total balance. And then we're going to re-amortize it. So we're going to stretch that out over 40 years so that the payment's more affordable. And it's because we're so payment conscious, we look at that and we say, oh, wow, you know what? That just might be manageable. Problem is, you've had this loan for 10 years. You're finally at the point where you're going to start to pay off principal, and now you've got to go not even back to a 30-year, but a 40-year loan, where for the next decade, you're just paying off more interest. You haven't really bought down the principal balance of the loan. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a very good deal financially. The other problem is this. And I'm just giving you these stats because this, I've been here before. I understand what to look for. And I want to just give you guys some. This does not mean that the market's crashing tomorrow, by the way. But this is what this market looks like a little while from now. And I'm not even going to say a specific date because who in the world knows? I certainly don't. And then if anybody says they do, then you have to really question why they think that. But anyways, the other problem with loan modifications is the redefault rate is about 65%. It's a stall tactic. Again, people, when faced with distress, tend to withdraw rather than become hostile. They tend to just kind of bury their heads in the sand a little bit. It is a stressful, emotional time. I have been through the ringer with some folks, and what banks have not allowed, and then ultimately allowed, what they did to try and beat up people, how we fought for them, how we got a short sale done, which, by the way, are going to start coming back pretty heavily, I think, here in the next little while. And so, I've got a little bit more to say on this topic, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another break, give you guys a chance to think about a question or two that you'd like to ask that might not be relevant to this topic. Maybe it is. Happy to answer any questions you guys have in the last 15 minutes or so of this show. The number here is 843-556-1250, 843-556-1250. If you want to reach out to me personally and have a conversation about what's going on in the market, maybe some of your concerns, you want to do some planning with me, my number is 843-400-8009, 843-400-8009, or you can check us out online, listingsincharleston.com. Stick around for more of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com.
Find Brian Beatty online at listingsincharleston.com. The Brian Beatty Real Estate Show continues next on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA. 1250 WTMA. Now, the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show continues on Charleston's Big Talker, 1250 WTMA.
Welcome back, folks, to the last few minutes of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. 843-556-1250 is the number here in the studio, 843-556-1250. Now, if you're a little freaked out about what I've said this morning, I would say that don't be too concerned just yet. This is not, I think, right around the corner, but you are starting to see things head in that direction. We saw the fact that the federal eviction moratorium got lifted this week. With an unemployment, people are going to have to start going back to work. So things are tending to move in that direction. Now we've talked about folks in forbearance. We've talked about things like loan modifications, and the fact that about 65% of them traditionally have a redefault rate. So really the reality is this. If you look at the entry-level market, lower income housing, they have been hit really hard already with the increase in the cost of ownership. Prices have gone up dramatically in almost all areas of Charleston in the lower income areas. I mean, it's been incredible to watch the appreciation. And remember, we talked about the fact that we don't necessarily have a shortage of inventory because we're selling more properties than we've sold in the past. So there's plenty of inventory to purchase. The problem is we have an excessive demand curve. And so when you look at the lower income or entry level markets in Charleston, they're already essentially getting priced out, right? But you also look at the folks that own property like that. A good majority of them are in the service, retail, hospitality industries. Those industries have been hit really hard. So what are they going to do? If they've been in forbearance and they haven't gotten employed somewhere else, there's very little chance of them being able to get out once basically forbearances come to an end, or what basically once the clock stops ticking. And so what is that going to do to those properties? Well, it's going to eat up the equity that they had built through appreciation in that market. You tack that on to the cost of sale associated with selling the property, and it's fair to say that a lot of those properties will not have equity. So who's going to buy them if prices become so ridiculous that folks that earn, $40,000 a year, $50,000 a year can't afford them if interest rates go up to, say, around 4%, 4.5%. Because remember, going from 2.5% on an interest rate to 4% is about a 20% increase in payment. For a lot of folks, that prices them out of a market they're already struggling to get into in the first place. And so now that's when you're going to start to see things like short sales. They're going to come back. REOs are going to come back. I've had a lot of experience with this on the investment side, on the representation side, with sellers selling distressed property, getting them out of bad situations. And I'll tell you that if I could go back in time with what I know now, I would have encouraged people to have conversations with me sooner rather than later if they were in distress financially. Don't be afraid to at least understand what your options are, and come up with a game plan. If you can get out, get out. If things get better, fantastic. That's amazing. That's what we all hope for. But some people, I think, are unrealistic about what they can actually accomplish and whether they can actually get ahead or not, whether they can get out of the situation. I have a lot of experience with that. If that's something that you're going through, if you know somebody that's going through that, I encourage you to give me a call. I'm happy to just walk you through it. This is what I want to be doing more of as this market starts to shift. Now, as of right now, obviously things are still pretty good, but this is, I think, the future of our market at some point here. Maybe in the next, I don't know, this time next year, maybe. We'll see. But, there's something else that's going to start to come up. They're actually already starting to do it a little bit. We're talking about short sales, meaning you coordinate with the lender to sell the property for less than the amount that you owe them, right? A short sale would be, hey, you owe $300 and you're trying to sell it for $290 and you don't have $10,000 to give them in the form of a difference. So and I bet you've probably never heard of a coordinated sale. A coordinated sale is essentially when a lender initiates a short sale. They're already doing it. Here's a little foreshadowing. If you do a short sale, this is what they'll say. Hey, if you agree to, we notice you're behind on your payments. If you agree to do a short sale, we'll give you X amount of money to go ahead and do it. We'll give you some relocation assistance. $10,000 in relocation assistance to basically give us your house back. They're ramping up their systems right now to be able to do this. They're hiring to be able to do this. They learned their lesson from last time. They've got much better processes, and if the market doesn't get absolutely flooded, then we shouldn't be looking at short sales that take a year, like some of the ones that I had back when we were doing them in 2008, 2009, 10, 11, 12. So I hope that what I said this morning was well received. I'm sure you guys probably have some questions on it. Here's what I would say, because this is going to go against the grain of what other real estate agents are going to say, and it's frankly because they're not taking the time to really research the market and talk to people and industry experts that really know what's going on. Because they're going to say everything is great, sunshine and rainbows, right? Perfect time to buy, perfect time to sell. We've all heard that from real estate agents. It doesn't matter what the market looks like; it's always the perfect time to buy or sell. Apparently, imagine that. But I encourage you to do your own research. If you want to question where I'm getting my data, you want to have a more in-depth conversation about it, you want to work with somebody that really understands the marketing, and has a lot of experience in real estate. You want to buy, sell, or invest in real estate right now, then feel free to give us a call. We'd love to earn your business. My number is 843-400-8009. That's 843-400-8009. You can go to our website, listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or you can send me an email. Brian, that's Brian with an I, at brianbeattyteam.com. Or you can just Google, Brian Beatty, and I'll come up. But anyways, thanks for joining us this morning as we've been talking about the real estate market, what I think is going to happen here in the future. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, 843-400-8009. You guys enjoy your weekend, and happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Thanks for sticking around.
Join us for another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show next Saturday morning at 9 and Sunday morning at 10. Contact Brian Beatty online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-400-8009. That's 843-400-8009.